Good evening. Welcome to the Power of Now. I'm Coach Mitchell.
And I'm Coach Dan.
Together we are MD Coaching and Consulting. Welcome to the Power of Now. Tonight's session, and we truly hope that you're going to engage, is talking about letting go of the ego.
Yes.
Letting go of the ego. We all have one that rises up in us periodically, if not consistently. So tonight we're going to talk through what that looks like, what the ego looks like when it rears its ugly head, and hopefully get to some solution points or some points that we can work through in overcoming ourselves. That's basically what it boils down to. So go ahead, click that link above the video, allow StreamYard access to see your names so that we can see who is engaging with us. And we really, really want you to be participants in tonight's session.
Absolutely. And if you haven't caught on yet, you know all of our sessions really are about self-mastery. That's the thing now, is that we're moving into that era where we're all looking to become better versions of ourselves. And it's more than, say, years ago, when it was just personal development. It's going a little bit deeper than that. So that's why, we hope that you engage and you participate. And as well as say, these are awareness sessions. We give you what we can in a short time frame, but that's to bring the awareness, and hopefully you will take the ball and will either reach out to us later for further assistance, or you'll take the ball and you'll run with it, seeking additional knowledge on your own.
Absolutely. And we can definitely tell that self-mastery is a quintessential element that we need in society today. People are short-tempered, fuses are short. It doesn't take much, if anything, to trigger seemingly from the outside a person. So not just the ego that we're dealing with, but the emotions that are invoked and led by the ego.
Yep. And if you begin to notice that all of our sessions are connected. So last week, to the point that Coach Mitchell just stated, last week we talked about, controlling your emotions. And we talked in the past about awareness, which again is going to come part of tonight's discussion, because everything actually begins with the awareness. If it's not in your consciousness, it does not exist. So you have to be aware of something, even when it's with you, which ironically is one of the last places that we notice things.
Absolutely.
Because we're constantly looking outward. We're in that space and time now where we're looking inward.
Yeah, and just to add to that, you're absolutely right, because I think where our ego, along with our emotions, as well as pride, gets in the way is because we are always looking at someone else's behavior, someone else's actions, and we're not focusing on ourselves. And that's one of the problems that we see today, right, in society. So
we're going to begin to just jump in and again, whoever's out there, please follow Coach Mitchell's suggestion. Click the StreamYard link up.
Good afternoon, Pastor Nicole. Thank you for joining us. Got a doctor in the house.
Glad that you have returned, and thank you for the shout out that I understand you gave us. Much appreciated. So, Coach Mitchell,
absolutely.
I want to start out with a couple of quotes.
Okay.
To get us moving.
Okay.
It says, "When the ego dies, the soul awakes." That was from Mahatma Gandhi. So you think about that, and we're going to get in and to try to really give you information as to why that occurs. Another quote is, avoid having the ego so close to your position that when your position falls, your ego goes with it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, over the years, people would define themselves, themselves by the things that they had.
Had and do.
Yes, their titles, their jobs. Their
Coach, you
homes.
getting into the solutions.
Oh no. The problem is people and I remember saying to somebody, when you define yourself like that and you think that makes you better than someone, then you better be ready to assume the position when the person next to you pulls up in a better car.
Oh yeah.
Or they give you a better address. Assume the position.
Yep.
You can't have it both ways. So that's why you don't want to get into defining yourself. Now that is actually getting into a solution. I'm not going to go to
right.
The other thing is people, and if you've ever gone through being in a situation where things are going well and then they fall apart. If you define yourself by those things, you're going to feel really lost because your identity was lost. And I think that the General Colin Powell, with his quote was saying, you don't want to attach.
Right.
And just one more quote. See, many confuse their ego with self-love, which is the furthest from the truth. The ego thrives on a false belief of separation, a space where love does not exist.
Yep.
And that's by me. Those are my words.
That's Claude Garrison or Darren Wright?
That's Darren Wright. So,
You're absolutely right. And also to add to that, I think also your quote is spot on when it comes to the frailty of the ego, because it's not love, it's actually a protection mechanism when people do not allow themselves to be vulnerable and humble. So
yes. And we're going to talk about that. And it goes kind of circling back real quick to Mahatma Gandhi's quote about when the ego dies, the soul awakes.
yes,
Because when the ego moves out the way, what you are inside, it gives it a space to actually bloom,
to come out.
alive.
Exactly.
Uh,
A little that.
Now, as Coach Mitchell said, we all have an ego. And the ego isn't always bad. It's something that we use as a way to adapt, to control our situation. But then what happens is we never go back to check it, we evaluate it, and it then can become, yes, out of control. And therefore it goes from our protector to the thing that's actually doing us in.
That's right.
So, let's say the ego is more than believing you're God's gift to the world, though that's one of its most common forms. We notice, based on interacting with someone, they got an ego, And most of the time, it's not a positive response from your audience when you come across very egotistical. And ego is not confidence. Slight difference. I would align ego probably more with arrogance. So I think you want to be mindful of that.
I would say persistent arrogance.
Yes.
Because it's okay to be confident in who you are and knowing who you are outside of a label, but authentically who you are, right? But I think having that self-righteous indignation is part of the ego, that the negative ego that's speaking, because the ego is not bad, right? The ego is not bad, but I heard or I read somewhere that, when you are exhibiting negative attributes of the ego or your subconscious mind, that you have to always be right that there is no one or anything above you. And the anonym was edging God out.
Yes.
And, if you don't believe in God, it's edging goodness out, it's edging greatness out, it's excluding those things that make you a humble person in spirit.
Yes.
So,
Yeah, it's excluding those things that are greater than yourself.
exactly.
Now, you might believe there's nothing greater than yourself. At that point, you need to come to the next class or something, because if you believe that you are the greatest thing on this little blue marble in this universe, then you might need a therapist.
Yeah, that's psychoanalyst. We can't,
Right.
we're not delving into that. But you're right. But that actually leads to something else, which is
Yes.
narcissism.
Yep.
And so the ego, we can work with that. But narcissism is a clinical
Yes.
it's a clinical diagnosis, and that's not something that we can get into. And you can see that play out in in any platform, in any system that you look at, in the political system, social structures, things that are happening. But nevertheless, let's get back to the ego.
So let's think about what is the ego, without all the clinical jargon, and why the ego is not always bad. Well, the ego basically, gives us our sense of self, of who we are. We use it, to define our identity.
Mm-hmm.
And it's who we think we are. Now, here's the thing why it ties into other things we talked about, because our ego influences our thoughts. Thus, it influences our bets, our beliefs, emotions, thoughts, and stories. And it really, helps us to determine or define whether it's true or false,
Mm-hmm.
who we need to be accepted by others. And you can connect that why the other things we talked about are so important. In other words, becoming comfortable
Mm-hmm.
with yourself, where you no longer feel a need to be accepted by others.
And I think that's such a poignant point, that we need to realize that if we don't know who we are, we rely on other people to define our identities for us.
Absolutely. Yep. I absolutely agree with
Right?
that.
So I think it's so important to sit in the self-awareness space, meditation, whatever, you may want to label it as, to really think about our behaviors, what we really think, what are our values,
Yes.
our belief system. What are those core things that really identify who we are?
Yes.
Who we are. And I don't want to go too far in that, because I think that'll be our summation, that'll be where we wrap up. But go ahead, Coach.
But you raised a good point, and Dr. Nicole, posted something which, again, things we mentioned before, that ego is an acronym for edging God out. And again, edging out, and that's what we say, even if you don't believe in God, it's edging out that there's something greater than you.
And not everything is about you.
Yes.
Not everything is about you, because when the ego comes forward, it puts up a defense.
Mm-hmm.
It puts up a defense, and you're constantly taking things as a personal attack, which sometimes may not even have anything to do with you.
Right.
But it becomes a personal attack because your ego is frail.
Yeah.
It's fragile.
Yeah. It's there trying to protect you.
Mm-hmm.
And this goes to what you said earlier. It's protecting you from your vulnerability. And you may have heard me mention this name in the previous session, and I highly recommend that, those who are listening, that you search out Dr. Brene Brown. Mm-hmm. She does a series of speeches and, things on our power is in our vulnerability.
Mm-hmm.
Because when we're open to being vulnerable, we actually connect with, again, another aspect of who we are.
Mhm.
You know, because the other thing, not to go off, what do you think what our vulnerability, kind of difference between our vulnerability and the ego? I think the ego rests in our head, the vulnerability rests in our heart.
Heart. Mhm.
So when our head is going, our thoughts can go way out of control. But it's the vulnerability in the heart, and the heart is also associated with what? It's with love,
Mhm.
it's with kindness, with compassion. So when we are able to be vulnerable, we open ourselves up to a whole nother experience. And you'll find, what? Hey, now, was it that bad? Now, granted, yes, when we are vulnerable, certain people will take advantage of that, but we don't base our life on that.
Correct.
So, go ahead. You want to say something?
No, I was just going to say, we might want to just talk about how you can identify when your ego is frail or fragile or fractured
Mhm.
or just in the way.
Well, I'm jump ahead again. Here a little.
Good evening, Annie. How are you? Thanks for joining.
One of the things that you can tell your ego is jumping out is, again, have the awareness of what do you think, what are your thoughts when people say certain things to you? Do you immediately go to a defense posture? Do you immediately feel offended? Mhm. Uh, what is your body telling you in those moments? And again, go back to our session last week about the difference between emotions and feelings.
Mm-hmm.
Your your emotions are, would you say again, in your heart, but
Mhm.
your feelings reside in your head. But then look at your body and say, what's going on here? And take that moment to pause. And I'm actually glad, I believe you said Annie just joined.
Yes.
I think she gave last week a good response to have that moment to breathe.
To breathe,
Which
yes.
is something we always advocate.
Mm-hmm.
Which is always, it's become harder because we have this need to quickly react. Mhm. Which again is the ego. Like, I gotta say something, I gotta do something in the moment. But moving beyond
Hi, Deborah. Thanks for joining us.
is, looking, at how you respond, I should say how you react,
Mm-hmm.
because we make a difference between that, and how you feel in that moment.
Mm-hmm.
Where you react. Do you argue back and forth on everything and always seeking to be right?
Mm-hmm.
Are you always seeking to have the upper hand? Mhm. Do you find yourself being overly critical about everything with everybody?
Mm-hmm.
That's just a sign that, again, it's all about you. One of the things you've heard me say, and I learned this, I think, I've said it so much, I think it's my own words, but it's not. I think I got it from Dr. Wayne Dyer, who said, do you want to be right or do you want to win? Mhm. And the ego will force you, drive you to want
Drive
to be
you.
right.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
But when you look at long term, it's like, no, I want to win. And sometimes winning appears to the shallow mind that you lost.
Absolutely. And I also think that in the moment, and I don't want to confuse an argument with an egotistical person,
Right.
but I think that if you're not aware, then after that cloud has moved beyond and you don't give it any other thought, I think that's where you can determine if your ego is in the way, or pride, ego or pride, or if you're really a conscious person or self-aware. Go back to the self-awareness. If you're self-aware, then you're really thinking about ways to deal with how you may have reacted or responded, what you may have said or done and could have done differently.
Mhm.
I think that's where the defining line is. So it's like you can't judge a book by its cover. You can only go by what's inside the book before you can make an accurate assessment
Mhm.
of what the story is all about.
And you know,
So
there's something else too. I think. Oh, go ahead.
no, I just wanted to post Deborah's question. She has a question, so I think it's apropos to pause and either respond or if we can get back to her on her question. So her question is, what are your thoughts about a person's ego being a way to communicate to others when they are not comfortable talking to people?
Good question.
Very good question.
I see that as well, let's see. You have any thoughts? Something came back to my mind.
No, you go ahead.
People who I think it's people putting up their wall before they go into an uncomfortable conversation, and they come across a certain way because again, it's all about protection.
Mhm.
I would probably say, just start. This goes back to noticing, being aware of your body. And I'll come back to the question, but I remember when I used to travel a lot for my job when I was younger. And I always noticed that once my plane landed in Newark Airport, my body started to change.
Mm-hmm.
I became aware. It started to tense up. You almost get, as I say, you get the angry face.
You got to mean mug people because you don't want anybody approaching you.
That's based on so many, false beliefs.
Right.
This was the outcome. So it's that same story we tell ourselves when we're going into a conversation with someone where we start off with
a preconceived.
Yes, and it comes out abrasive.
Right.
So I think there was a question here. People aren't not almost not necessarily comfortable talking to people.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe not comfortable talking about certain topics, or it can be certain topics to certain people. But it is a defense mechanism.
It's a defense mechanism, and I won't say it's ego. I would say it's the defense mechanism because they don't want to be hurt.
Yes.
So it's part ego, but it's also part communication.
Yes.
Right. It's also part communication, and I just want to jump into what some of the signs of the ego are, a frail ego, because these are things that eventually we can work to overcome.
Yes.
Right. So that's defensiveness, which is what we were just talking about. Annie, we will get to your question in 1 minute. Indecisiveness. People aren't able to decide. They lack confidence.
Yes.
Right. Holding grudges.
Mm-hmm.
I can tell you before I was saved, I would hold a grudge forever and a day. Forever and a day. Plus a day. Because, it was an egregious act towards me. But I have learned not to do that because the harm comes to me.
Yes.
No grudge. You're unable to handle failure. People feel like, if they fail, then everybody is pointing the finger at them. That's another sign of a frail ego. So hopefully, Deb, this is walking through your question because it's very loaded and it's not a one response will answer all of what you're asking in that question. People strive for perfectionism and no one is perfect. So if your ego is on 100%, display is when you fail at failure.
Mm-hmm.
When you feel like, the world has come crushing down and you can't make a mistake. That failure and the perfectionism plays off of each other. You don't want to hear anybody's feedback. Nothing that anyone says to you matters. You have that whatever attitude, right? That's your response. And you're so bent on impressing other people,
Mhm.
impressing other people instead of living your life as your best, as the best version of who you are. So, and I think life, we're adults, right? So life has added to the complexity of how we react and respond.
Yes.
So,
It's part of societal conditioning,
mhm,
and that means everything from TV,
absolutely.
social media, as to how we're supposed to respond.
Come on, click that link. Let us know you're there.
It's one of the things that I see often,
Hmm.
and we'll come back to also come back to
Hmm.
last question is, I want you to be aware if you're a social media person and you happen to jump in certain, say, text threads, and someone may ask a question, or someone's response may not be absolutely correct, factual, correct. Observe some of the responses that they receive from other people. Then ask yourself, how do you feel about those responses? Meaning, people automatically go to calling names, and these are adults, automatically go to calling names and bashing other folks simply because you disagree with them,
Hmm.
or maybe they got something wrong. Mhm. There's where your ego becomes very toxic. Mhm. Now, does it play, uh, adapt to your surroundings? I think we prepare ourselves based off our surroundings. I think the ego is going to either be there or it's
Hmm.
not. Uh, because you'll decide when you feel vulnerable. Uh, I guess you could say that could be part of your surroundings, based on your surroundings, but it's going to be based on how you feel about your surroundings, if that makes sense. Mhm.
Hmm.
Again, between emotions and feelings. So, whatever's going through your head in any given situation is going to probably determine how your ego responds.
Good evening, Deborah. Good evening, Edwina. Thank you for joining us.
Mhm.
Yes.
So, again, I think both of those were really good questions. And I think what's really important is to, again, have the awareness and catch yourself.
Hmm.
Again, we are so conditioned that we have to respond. Now,
Exactly. And I was reading something about the three phases or three masters of your ego,
Mhm,
which is the moral anxiety, which comes from your conscious,
mhm,
right? The neurotic anxiety, which comes from instincts,
mhm,
and then the realistic anxiety, which arises from the reality principle, which is what you perceive your reality to be
mhm.
and how people are reacting to you, right? So that question that's on the banner, did you adapt to your surroundings, is a question from Annie from your airport story.
Oh yeah, yes, Annie, that was exactly what it was, and I wasn't aware of it initially, and then it was just one day I just happened to notice it. I could actually feel, as soon as the plane hit the tarmac, you know, I could feel my body tensing up, and that's in addition to just hating to be in the airport. Mhm. And this was long before airport got as bad as it is, stressful as it is now. But I began to realize it was my surroundings, and we all are very, I think, been guilty of that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but again, not right or wrong. Just be aware of, are you feeling that way in any particular surrounding? You going to your job. If you go to your job, you have to feel yourself tense up.
I do,
Yeah.
because I got Confederate flags on my left, on my right.
Yes.
I don't know if that's ego or just,
No, that's
protective
protective.
mode.
Yes, yes. You know, the fact that you begin paying, if you are aware of it, then you can deal with it. And then have that conversation where you begin to ask yourself, which is one of the things, is one of the solutions. You ask yourself, what am I afraid of
Right.
in this particular moment? Again, somebody else could be in the same situation. they have a different response. What's coming across, I think, in that moment, again, I think it would be for you and probably, most African Americans would be all of the thoughts and memories come into play in that moment.
Right.
Actually, in that moment, which was the power of now.
The power of now, but all of what's going on in the state of, in the country today, it's like, I turn around in the wrong driveway.
Yes.
I might lose my life,
Mhm.
So it's a little bit different. It's really not the ego at play,
No.
but a more relatable to the topic is going to Walmart versus going to Costco.
Yes.
So what are you projecting when you go to Walmart versus what are you projecting when you go to Costco? Because that's part of your identity,
Yes.
if you will, because Walmart has a different social structure, position in social
Mhm.
structure than Costco or BJ's or Sam's or Whole Foods, right?
Yes.
So, if I'm in Walmart, am I in Walmart with a certain posture versus if I'm in Costco and I'm relaxed?
Yes.
And not relaxed because, I fear, I don't fear for my safety, but I'm relaxed because I feel like I'm around a certain economical social group versus being in Walmart. Am I there and feeling like these people are beneath me? But if you really think about it, you are those people,
Yes.
right?
Which again, you want.
I love Walmart.
Yeah. Most importantly, you want to be aware.
Right.
Because if you're aware, then you can make the adjustments.
Right.
And you begin one of the things I was, saying a few minutes ago is when you find yourself nervous or afraid, just having that inner talk. What am I afraid of? Nothing is occurring. Nothing looks like it's occurring. Yeah, I saw something, but that doesn't mean anything.
Right.
It's symbols. And we can have a whole other conversation about how we interpret symbols. Is there a possibility? Absolutely. But in that moment, you ask yourself, I'm preparing myself for battle. And we touched on this before. We have carried that feeling in so many areas of our life that we're always preparing for some conflict.
Right. And that goes back to the defensive aspect of the ego because people are preparing for battle because their ego has been shattered.
Yes.
So now I got to come back. I
Mhm.
got to come back with something. So their defenses are up, right? So it shatters the ego and they want not to ever be seen in a negative light by others,
Yes.
right?
Mhm.
So
And that was like the thing that you just touched on is some of the things that people don't think about when they talk about the ego. Again, the perfectionism. We see perfectionism as being just somebody being obsessed with something. But that can be the fact that your ego is forcing you or driving you to seek perfection. Why do you seek perfection? Because it's a form of acceptance.
right, and you overcompensate
Yes.
for your lack of confidence.
Yes. Mhm.
Right. So
You have to be with somebody who say, yeah, I'm aware of this. I don't care. Now, that could go the other way too, where you have such a low self-esteem that you don't care. But it could also be a sense of, again, I'm comfortable being who I am. And that doesn't matter where you fall, because it's that comfort and confidence where you have then begin to diminish your ego's control over you.
say that again,
Yeah.
Coach.
When you become comfortable with who you are, and you know who you are, then you begin to diminish the ego. You ever notice, and I remember reading this years ago in an article, and someone said the company that they were let go of, and this was somebody who was a CEO, said when he returned in a different capacity, not to the company, but more like a client.
Mm-hmm.
But he said something. He said, he said, I remember walking to this board meeting with jeans, a t-shirt, I hadn't shaved, and a jacket.
Mm-hmm.
The same place I used to have to go in with a suit with a certain outfit. Because then I was dressing to appease others. Now I know who I am and I control the situation.
Okay.
I don't need to dress for them.
Okay.
Mhm.
Okay. So I get. Okay. So you're doing you're talking about the flip side of the ego.
Mhm.
Okay.
Whereas it's because see the ego is basically masculine that you have to define who you are.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because once you know who you are, the ego plays has very little power over you,
Mm-hmm.
and that you could be at any stage in your life,
Right.
but it's give you example like last night on a discussion, the speaker was saying how he's a teacher and was saying that another teacher referred to him as boy. Mhm. And his response to the students was, I didn't hear it said, doesn't matter to me.
Mm-hmm.
I know who I am.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have any need to go over there and address that teacher.
That's right.
Now, again, you're comfortable knowing who you are.
Right.
Now, and
But that's one of the ways of overcoming the
yes.
ego,
Mhm.
right? So
Yeah, and looking at if you're not comfortable with who you are, having the awareness of those gaps,
mm-hmm.
and therefore you can begin to address them.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
And my girlfriend Deb says, that's her. She's comfortable, no ego with being who she is. And she is. She's just comfortable being who she is, no pretense. No pretense. And we have Annie who, good evening, Deborah. Sister-in-law is on. So Annie asks, is that the other side of your ego coming into yourself?
I would say yes.
Yes.
I would
Yes.
absolutely say yes.
That is one of the ways that you can overcome or combat being egotistical,
Mhm.
is being comfortable with who you are. Because again, the perfectionism that we were just talking about, perfectionism means that I can't make a mistake. If I make a mistake, others are going to look at me as if I am less than.
Absolutely.
And it's a self-inflated image or perception of yourself. So the flip side of that is being comfortable with who you are. You're going to make mistakes.
Mhm.
You learn from your mistakes. If you don't make mistakes, then something is wrong with you. Oh, you're egotistical. So it's so it just, perfectionism, when you strive to be perfect, if you will, it's because you're feeding into the fear that other people see you less than who you have presented yourself to be.
Yes.
So you don't want to be so caught up and wrapped up in perfectionism that when you're not perfect, you think that, you feel unworthy and you think that other people think you're unworthy.
Yes.
So,
Mhm.
or less than perfect.
And one should also look at it as a spectrum, mhm, more so than on-off comparison when you go from one side to the other. It's a spectrum, where you may begin to notice that you begin to change. You may notice that you're comfortable being you in certain spots, in certain situations, and not comfortable in others. Like I said, I keep going back to this. The key is the awareness without the judgment.
Right.
Mhm. When you feel uncomfortable, if you don't need to respond, it doesn't matter. It's just something going on inside of you. But if you ever put in a situation you feel somebody says something and, say for instance, you're out and about and there's a cashier and we all, in this moment where someone just says something and it comes out the wrong way. And we go into our defense, like, oh, did he or she just say that? No. not thinking that it may have nothing to do with you. You know, but that's where the self mastery comes in, that you're always willing to take that pause, observe it, and you become quicker at it the more you become
Aware.
aware and become more of a self master of who you are. You have that moment where you can just catch yourself and weigh all options. I'm just ignore this.
Exactly.
You know, it's not worthy of who I am, which is not an egotistical statement.
Hmm.
That's your self identity.
Right. I had to do that at Walmart
Mm.
with Sheila, the cashier. When all the problems of America started with Biden being elected for president, I just had to walk away. Bye, Sheila. Because Sheila was not self-aware. You
Right.
know, Sheila had her head in the sand for a very long time. But nevertheless, you're right. You have to become, which won't happen overnight, self-aware
Yes.
about what you're feeling in the moment. Even if you don't deal with it in the moment, deal with it after you've either calmed down, if you've been in a tumultuous situation or a stressful situation. Deal with it after you've calmed down, but self-aware enough to know that it's something that you have to deal with.
Yes. Mhm. You know, as something that I've said, several times, is those moments where you actually ask yourself when you respond. Hold on, let me go back. I'm gonna say when you react, because I want to make a clear distinction between reaction and a response.
Hmm.
When you react, kind of in the moment, and then you look back and go, "That's not who I want to be."
Hmm.
So there's where Coach Mitchell said, you deal with it later, and you process it, and you learn from it, and you are more aware of it the next time it happens. Now, here comes a big challenge where the ego may come out even more when we're around other people and something occurs that we feel is quote unquote disrespectful.
Hmm.
We then feel we have to act. We have to do something. But I can say this, you're going to find more people looking to those who handle the situation honorably and peacefully, more so than handling it, with an abrasive response.
Hmm.
Don't get me wrong, you must still get people, and you may still feel that you need to let that person have it. Mhm. But we're moving into a space where that's not going to be the acceptable response. So, that is, like I said, walking away. And I would then say to people, think about those who have truly become, South masters, masters of South.
Hmm.
And for me, it's always been, I don't know if anyone's familiar with the Shaolin monks. If you're martial arts, you have some knowledge. They are warriors, but yet they're peaceful.
Yeah.
They have become so level headed,
Or consciously aware.
consciously aware, yes. To get to that point where, I don't need to engage in this confrontation, this negativity. I don't need to prove anything.
Right. Can we park right there for a second?
Absolutely.
Because I think you said something that's real key. They've become consciously aware that they don't have to react and respond, which is where we can clearly distinguish that our reactions and our responses are because we have not reached that pinnacle point of that higher level of consciousness where even in the moment when something is not going our way, someone is saying something that we may feel is egregious or disrespectful, or it could be anything, that we immediately react instead of taking a breath and pausing to say, oh, instead of reflecting, internalizing it, assessing, why did they say that? Or why did that come out that way?
Mhm.
What are they really saying? Are they hurt? Are they coming from a place of hurt? Are they coming from a place of pain? Instead of saying, oh, that was about me. So I think that is a way to to distinguish how we get to a level of letting go of the ego and processing in the moment what is happening.
Yes. And again, I just want to go back because I make a clear distinction between reaction and response. Mhm. Now, with Deb's response saying, bye, Felicia. You know what? When you can get there and simply say, bye, Felicia, you know what? In a way that almost looks like you weren't even affected by this person's behavior at all. That is that point of self mastery. You don't have to go word for word, but you got to remember what happens. This connects to other things we said. When you slide into that stressful moment, think about what you're doing to yourself. Now, going back to something you just said, Coach Mitch, when you immediately think, you internalize it, guess what you're doing? You're making it about you. All right? Which is what? The ego. Maybe that person was having a bad day. They would have done it to the next person behind you, whatever, or they could be carrying some issues from lifelong trauma about you as a woman, as a person of color. You just happen to be in that spot.
Right.
And
And
maybe
we've all done it.
Yes.
Where something just triggered us, where ordinarily it wouldn't bother us, but in that moment, someone may have said something and you've blown up without thinking, because that was the straw that broke the camel's back.
Yes.
Like, no, not today, not this moment, not this minute, not another second. We going toe to toe. But the flip side of that is when you come out of that place of emotional reaction, you're able to really assess how you responded and why you responded the way you responded. But you also have the je ne sais quoi of calmness to think about why that other person reacted the way they did, or said what they said. So,
yeah, and the objective is you always want to win. In any situation, you want to win. That's it. Winning may mean not being right, and winning may appear as losing. And I say this, to shallow mind, which is winning is I'm gonna walk away from this nonsense. Again, going back to what Deb said. When we don't say bye, Felicia.
bye, Phil. Bye, Felicia.
Yeah,
Just bye.
And if you really want to start sign this way, and this might come across as being petty, as we talk about being our better self, but people will usually become more upset when you don't engage because they realize they've lost. Because guess what? You were not moved. That shows a great sign of strength. And we've heard it all, growing up, that it may appear to some as weakness, but it is a great sign of strength because what? You practice self-mastery.
But the difference is telling someone, instead of saying bye, Felicia, verbally, just walking away. Because when you do the bye, Felicia, or bye, Phil, or shut up, or this conversation is over, you're still engaging. You're still engaging. You're not really, in essence, walking away. You're still in a contentious debate, if you will. So I think that's the difference. Being able to just, okay, and walk away. I think that's the part that you have to get to.
Yes.
In order for that level of reaction to get that other person to see, okay, well, maybe I need to reevaluate my response.
And that's what I go back to say. It's a spectrum. So you may not get to that point. You know what? Being able to just say your words before, you know, you walk away. You know, again, that's just part of the spectrum. You eventually will get to that point where I don't have to say anything, which is even more of a victory because, again, you're letting the other person know that you are not on that level. Because I just think you're better than them.
Right.
I said to people, I'm just better than this, behavior or this activity.
Right. And that you're not going to go down the rabbit hole with them. Now, there are instances where, your levels of stress, whatever you're dealing with, may cause you to have reactions that you don't normally have. That is not necessarily the ego. Those are external forces that may cause you to act out of character because you're dealing with so much. But I think that the bottom line for the ego topic that we're discussing is the fact that you need to make sure that one of those 7 characteristics are not constantly coming into play when you're having your normal, regular interactions with others.
So let's say, some of the things that some of the things that you can do, that I recommend that you do.
Mm-hmm.
Again, always begins with awareness, where you begin to observe your thoughts and your reactions. And again, not your responses. Your responses you can observe, and if you responded, again, if you respond, then it's something that you thought about before you did it, which will eventually ensure that you end up being okay.
Mm-hmm.
Ask yourself, when things like that happen, whether again, we've been using all of these scenarios where we're dealing with strangers, but we could be dealing with family members, we could be dealing with people we know. But whenever you feel that ego, rearing its ugly head, ask yourself, what's it trying to tell me? What part of me is trying to tell me something, get my attention, or get me to believe something? And you want to, again, do this without judgment. You're asking a sincere question.
Mm-hmm.
Because this is about your growth. Observe how you're really feeling. And this is why I say when you get to that pinnacle of self-mastery, you won't have any emotions about other people's craziness. You'll be able to detach from making it about, or say you move to looking at them for who they are and not making it about you.
Thank you, Annie, for joining us. Thank you for engaging. We really appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Have a great night.
When you decide that you're going to take that journey to truly put your ego in check, some of the things like I said, and especially when it comes into the self-doubt, because I think this is a common area that people don't think about it being egotistical.
Okay.
Ask yourself, really, what am I afraid of? Why am I procrastinating? Why am I not following through on something that I desire, something I say I want? Why don't I follow through on it? Have that inner conversation. Some of the things you can do is the mantras. Now, mantras come in handy. You see even sports teams before going into a game, they'll get a mantra going on. Because what's the mantra doing? It's reprogramming your subconscious mind. Because that's where all the issues occur.
Right. And it's building you up to know that really you are capable and confident enough to carry out the task at hand.
Yes.
So that way you're not getting defensive.
Nope.
You're not putting on a performance where it has to be perfect in your eyes
Mhm.
because you don't want anyone else to think that you're weak or incapable.
Mhm.
Right? So go ahead, Coach.
Nope.
Go ahead.
Also, seek out someone that's going to motivate you and push you. Mhm.
And be open to feedback because
Yes.
that's one of the things that, the ego allows the ego to get in the way. You don't want feedback because you think people are judging you.
Yes. On that, I saw something the other day that said, do not correct a fool or he will hate you. Correct a wise man and he will appreciate you.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't like to be corrected, when it's someone sincerely trying to help you, if you become defensive, just be mindful that that's your ego. Not good or bad, but it's your ego. You decide.
Right. But go back and think about it.
No.
Again, the thing is not to switch this off on a dime because you can't. This is not a course correct overnight. These are things that we have to work on.
Yes.
We are all a work in progress, but as long as we are making progress, I think AP just said something about progress this morning in prayer, but yeah, that just came to mind. But we are a work in progress, and as long as we're progressing, then we are at the very least becoming a better version of ourselves
Yes.
than we were the day before.
And that's the key, because you know what? None of these things were, in most cases, I would assume for most people out there, none of these things were really taught continuously. If you heard it as a child, it probably wasn't continuous. Again, self mastery. Those things, like I said, just weren't embedded. We were disciplined, but self discipline versus being disciplined for bad behavior is different.
I think one of the big things,
Now, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I think also one of the big things that we can do to get the ego out of the way is identify who we are, not the labels that people have put on us, but self-identity is important.
Well, I think that's the next discussion, because that is huge.
It really is. It really is. I'm not an executive director. That's what I do. That's not who I am. I'm not just a mom. I am, I think, a caring, nurturing, loyal, compassionate, kind person. And I can go on and on with my attributes, my values, but I am consciously aware of my identity. But I work on that every day. Every day.
Yes, and that's we make that another topic, because that's an area where most people are not taking the time, because as you just touched on, most people will go to their title or their role, not understanding that's not who you are.
That's right.
So you got to sit down and think. You got to sit down and be with peace with yourself to find out, who am I?
That's right.
But like I said, we'll leave that for later. The other thing you want to do is you want to remain humble. Are you a humble person?
Most times.
No. Again, we're on a spectrum. So,
sometimes not.
So, you want to check yourself, observe yourself, check yourself. The other thing to do is do something that I believe we're all here to do, which is to serve others. Be open to helping others. Remember, this is the journey. We're taking a step, one step at a time. And other things to really minimize your ego is be aware, are you seeking approval? And if somebody does not give it to you, are you diminished? Are you crushed? Ask yourself why. Stop making yourself the center, of our activities. It's okay to be quiet. Mhm. And look for ways to praise others. This is all done to shift, again, if your ego is dominant in your life, it's a way to shift the focus off of you and onto others.
Absolutely.
The stage is big enough for all of us to perform.
Absolutely. And on that note, Darren, we are coach. We're at the top of the hour.
Perfect.
And this, I think, has been a great discussion. The topic was great. Thank you for Coach Darren selecting tonight's topic, because it has been a great one, and we can parse this out into many other topics. So yes, thank you, Deb, for joining us. We really appreciate you spending a little bit of time with us. Peace and blessings. Both Debs tonight. We got Deborah Gutrich and we got Deborah Barksdale in the house tonight. So thank you both so much. Edwina, Pastor Nicole, thank you, Ray. I believe you're on the I Am Ready. So we thank you for that. And finding it not robbery to spend some time with us. Thank you, Edwina. You know I love you to pieces. And next week, we pray that you join us at 8 p.m. Tuesday night. We will come back. Hopefully, you'll be back. You'll join us and engage with us as you did tonight. It's been a very dynamic and very active group, and we really appreciate it. So I'm Coach Mitchell.
Hold on. I just want to close.
Oh, Coach Darren has something further to say. Hold on.
I looked at my notes and came across this quote, and I think this, I just thought it was a really good quote for those who are going out there, especially trying to conquer the world. It's by a gentleman named George Muller. It says, faith does not operate in the realm of the possible. There is no glory for the divine in that which is humanly possible. Faith begins where man's power ends.
Absolutely.
So are you going out doing anything where you're just saying, I have no clue how to pull this off, right? Doing what you're capable is not impressive anymore.
That's right. Faith without works, meaning that if you don't allow God, higher power, to orchestrate your steps, then you're not operating in faith. You're operating in ego, self-reliance mode.
Yes.
And we cannot do that. We cannot allow that to happen moving forward. So we thank you for joining us tonight. Deb, Annie, Edwina, Ray, Nicole, thank you. We will see you next week, 8 p.m. Tuesday night, The Power of Now. I'm Coach Mitchell.
And I'm Coach Darren.
Have an amazing evening.